because the candidate that I mentioned that was fake on the call, I reverse engineered the picture, and I found out that the person that he was impersonating unfortunately had passed away.
What? This is Looks Good on Paper, a podcast from Willow about flipping the script on traditional hiring. I'm Anita Chohan, and every episode I put big voices in hiring and work culture through 3 quick-fire questions, speed dating style, to get the habits, trends, and ideas that matter. Everyone, please help me welcome Nit Karuna is a global principal recruiter with over a decade of experience building technical teams across Canada, US, UK, Sweden, Australia, New Zealand. Where have you not been? And currently, Nit is a principal recruiter at Xero, focused on AI and ML hiring, where he leads recruitment for engineering, product, and data roles, including VPs of product and engineering, principal ML leaders, and applied scientists. Nit, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Anita. I appreciate you taking the time to connect today.
Yeah, so excited to have you and just hear your thoughts on stuff. I know you've obviously been in the space for a long time. You've seen a lot, and you've seen it from different countries, which this is kind of just for all the listeners. I have been chasing Nit to join us on this podcast because I feel like he has such a unique view, and I'm interested to see and hear it. So, for the benefit of everyone listening, how did you get to where you are today? And tell us a little about your journey.
Yeah, definitely. I don't feel like anybody goes to school for recruiting, right? So it's kind of one of those things where we kind of fell into it, but I've enjoyed it. I've done it for quite some time now. Started off on the agency days. I think like we mentioned, Anita, we met back when I was on the agency side of things, working at JobSpring, and then from that, it's kind of shifted into working primarily at startups. So I was working at Flipp initially, and then I moved over to Drop, both consumer apps, and then I kind of shifted gears now, working at Xero, which is more of like I would say cloud accounting. So far, it's been with Xero for about 6 years now, and we've worked across, yeah, a ton of different countries, a ton of different roles, and I feel like there's always a lot left to learn there on that front.
Amazing. That's so cool. Yeah, so you've kind of seen it all. Agency side, moving into more startup, more scrappy, and now it feels like it's a big, well-known brand now that you're part of. And what I love about what you're doing in this current role is you're contending with a lot of the newer stuff, like the AI and the ML stuff. So I'm sure I've sent over everything, so you know the drill. 3 questions, speed dating style. Why don't we just jump into the first one? So, in your opinion, what's the biggest hiring mistake that companies keep making, even though it's clearly not working?
Yeah, I think one thing that definitely stands out is still hiring based on where they've come from. So expecting like a plug and play candidate. So I don't want to, I guess, kind of, you know, throw shade at anybody or anything, but I feel like, I still see companies doing it. They'll look at the resume or they'll look at the LinkedIn and they'll be like, okay, this person worked at Google. Let's plug and play. We'll bring this person in. They're going to come in and they're going to massively upscale the rest of our team.
Yeah.
Not to say that that's not going to happen, but what's working at another company is not exactly going to work what's going to be working for you, right? There's different scaling challenges, different product challenges, the maturity of where the org is at. So there's a lot of different challenges on that front, and I think that's where it's easier to kind of fall into that trap of being like, okay, this person came from X company. If I bring them on board, they're going to come in and help level everything right away. What can the person actually do, right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter where you're coming from, as long as you've worked on some pretty cool stuff, made an impact on that side of things. I think that's more important in terms of what you're actually be able to do
Yeah.
versus actually what that company is going to look like, right? Because again, I've seen it happen before. People have come from larger corporations or larger companies. If they're trying to fit into a smaller company, the challenge with that is that you're not used to having the same amount of resources, for example, or you're not used to having the same scale, same budgets. So a little bit of a different scale. And from my personal experience, I've gone the other way. I've gone from
Yeah.
startups to a larger companies. Obviously, things are a little bit slower, but I would say that Zero is very unique. I don't have a ton of red tape. There's a ton of autonomy on that front. And
Amazing.
I think it's being able to kind of use those resources the right way possible. So I think at the
Yeah.
end of the day, we got to hire folks based on what they are capable of doing and also give them a chance on that
Yeah,
front.
agreed. Agreed. Yeah, this is something we hear a lot that, let's call it like the pedigree problem, right? Making the assumption that, those ex Meta, the ex Amazon will actually bring something. What you said though that I really like heard and I picked up early in the answer was this idea that like you bring this person and maybe they'll level up the whole company as well, or they'll bring something that hasn't been seen before. And I think it's also a lot of pressure to put on a candidate too. And don't think it's really fair at the same time.
Exactly. Exactly, right? It just comes to, each company has a different set of challenges that they kind of working through, different set of scales, different sort of
Yeah,
like maturity point in terms of the product life cycle. So it's kind of seeing
absolutely.
what fits best there.
Absolutely. And I think what's really interesting too is kind of like given the space that you're playing, especially with like the AI and the ML, is this something that you're seeing a lot of? Because I assume that there's a lot of good hires maybe coming from places like this.
Yeah, definitely. That I would say like some of the larger companies obviously have a little bit more of a head start, right, when it comes to
Yeah.
the AI space.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's kind of shifting a little bit in terms of where folks are coming from. But again, I would say like we also need folks that are scrappy, right? In that sense, that are coming from say smaller companies, or even if they have worked in again, not to say that someone coming from a larger company doesn't have that scrappiness or that ability
It's
to
true.
do it. They still want to do it. It just kind of have to line up with what the company needs at the time that they're hiring and what point they are, and also like personal interest level for the person, right? Like again, to each their own.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think that's a big thing too. Would this person fit from a company and a business perspective? But like, will this be something interesting to them if it's not going to be the scale that they're used to? Or will they feel like they have the upward mobility? And so, how are you even able to promise them the kind of employee experience or even retain them? Fine, you get them. Will you be able to even keep them? you know?
Exactly, right, and that's where that is a huge part of you know the retention fee is obviously a huge thing, and that
Yeah,
ties back into company culture and things like that to make sure
absolutely.
that that fits there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, question number two. What's a hidden bias that companies unknowingly have, even when they think that they're being progressive in their hiring?
I think this one I got thought about it a little bit. I do think like the culture fit is one that is top of mind. Like to me, culture fit is a very vague term, right? In some
Uh,
degree, if you don't have the right metrics and right processes in place, the culture fit interview almost becomes like a vibe check, which not necessarily fair, right? In terms of for the candidate and the candidate experience. So I think that's one thing that I think companies are trying to get away from. I mean, think for us, like we made sure when we did our interview process, like we kind of eliminated those biases at zero. So we have checkpoints, we have certain questions we're asking. Versus again, at the end of the interviews, there's going to be a debrief, and we'll actually walk through each stage. What did the person perform at? And it's more based on the actual performance
yeah,
and what they have done, and also the potential versus it being like a gut check or a vibe check. And I think a lot of companies make that mistakes when they don't have like a fully fleshed out interview process, fully set in place. Because if it's super ad hoc, where you don't actually have it standardized to some
yeah,
extent, then it becomes less of an actual quantitative decision and more of a gut feel. And that's where I feel like you know, for example, like with culture fit rounds, that's where I feel like sometimes it can go either way
fails.
for candidate fails.
Yeah,
And then that's not a good feeling for anybody on that
no.
front, especially because everyone's invested quite a bit of time, including
Oh,
the
it's
candidates, right?
huge. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think a lot about that kind of like you get to that point and fine, yeah, you hire them, whatever, and they leave because they don't turn out to be the right fit after all, like the cost of like the hiring process, the onboarding, the morale also within the team as well that falters following a loss like that too.
100%. And we do like I try to during the first like intake calls with hiring managers, we kind of like look at where their team's at, and we do kind of advocate for hiring a mix of folks on the team, right? You don't want to hire the exact same, for lack of better words, prototype or
Yeah,
personality, right? You want to that will create some conflicts potentially down the road. You want to hire a good, diverse like mix of talent on your team because that's how everybody grows together. And most
absolutely.
hiring managers are on board with that. As a recruiter, it's our job to kind of educate the hiring team. Just because this is not their main job, right? They excel
Yeah,
at what they do. This is our wheelhouse. We have to definitely make sure that we
yeah,
can help educate and advocate on that front to make sure that
absolutely.
the right decision make in place. And also with the way that the world's kind of shifting, there's a lot more laws in place now. There's a lot more. I know in Canada they've kind of shifted a few things, especially with like ghosting candidates. It's another big thing. We try to get back to every single
Very
candidate. I can
much.
tell you, for me personally, we go through every single applicant. We do have
Yeah,
AI, but we are actually reviewing every single applicant. We do not use AI to select a candidate. We actually go
yes.
through every single resume just because
Amazing.
that's how we do it. Yeah.
That's amazing. So, you said that there's like really good practices and things that you put in place to help your hiring managers to identify or like to reinforce that diversity is really important. Is there anything specific that you ask or you like impart that will help with that when they find that and they bring that in?
Yeah, so I think a few things on that first initial chat with them. I asked them to, give me a sense of what their team kind of already looks like. What's their team composition? What are the strengths on the team? What are the gaps on the team? and we will kind of focus on what the gaps are on the team, right? And during the interview process, we'll kind of structure our questions around, are these gaps going to be kind of filled with the person coming in? And that way we actually have concrete evidence, right? I think everything goes back to data, being able to tell the story with the data. So as we kind of interview candidates, the feedback, everything has to map back into what we're actually looking for. If it doesn't, or if they're like, there's situations where, let's say they're like, oh no, I don't want to go with this person, basically, at least you can go back and reference, be like, hey, this is what we talked about on our first chat. This, you said, what you said was the gaps. Are we making an opportunistic hire, or are we actually following
Mm,
back to what we wanted to actually hire for? So I think having those kind of chats initially, and just keeping rapport with the hiring managers, a lot
huge.
of them are super super supportive on that front. They want to hire the right way, make sure that they have a great team. So I think once you kind of have like a value prop on that sense, and actually explain like what we're looking for, and then mapping it back to what they identified was the gaps on
Yeah.
the team, then I
No,
think it's a
that's
little bit
huge.
easier to do, to kind of at least have some sort of guardrails in place for that final check there.
I love that. It really just it makes me think that some of these guardrails and these things that you have in place, like the data, it really helps you potentially also eliminate future bias as well. Like we talk about bias, but this is you guys also busting that bias through the process.
Exactly, right, and I feel like bias is something that you can't forget about. It's obviously something that you have to continually put an importance on, and definitely make sure you're identifying that. So I think you have to make sure that that's talked about at every single round. For us, we have like interviewer training that the teams go
Oh,
through to kind of help eliminate biases. So we kind of try to refresh that as much as we can.
amazing.
And I will give full kudos to the team in terms of like, they put a big importance on making sure we're hiring the right folks in terms of like diversity, as well as also focusing on limiting as much bias as we can. So everything comes back down to data for us, is how do we let data tell the story? Because you can't really argue with facts.
It's true, and very in line with Xero, what you guys do. The data and numbers, these things matter. I love to see it. All
Exactly.
right, and moving on to the third question, and this is personally my favorite, and I feel like it's the most fun. So if you were to suddenly remove CVs from your current hiring process, what would that look like? What would that look like at Xero?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. I feel like, personally for me, I feel like CVs only tell half the story, right? And I think now, given how folks can use AI to basically revamp their resumes, their CVs, I do think that longer term it is going to be one of those things that like we're obviously going to have to look into a little bit more. For me, I think if we were to remove CVs, I would just remove all the companies on there and just keep it blank, right? Or have the candidate just write like a quick like summary on what they have actually worked on, but actually want them to focus on what they've driven from an impact standpoint, and then have an
Yeah,
open conversation to see if we can
cool.
assess, versus, again, the resume is only going to tell half the story.
Yeah.
And I've unfortunately, you've also see resumes that are super lengthy. I've seen resumes that are 10 pages, and I've tried to give feedback to those candidates, like, hey, just as a tip, like, just to get you a little bit more attention on that, maybe want to condense it down to 2 pages, and maybe highlight the like 5 bullet points. You don't need 10 bullet points on each role. So I think those are the things I would just keep it blank. Or I was actually, we were trying to see if we can somehow get like video job descriptions going,
Yeah.
just because I feel like it's a bit more personable, and you kind of get it really hiring from the hiring manager. You kind of get a sense of who they are as a person, which I think is pretty
Yeah.
cool. But I think, yeah, CVs it's going to be an interesting couple of years, I think, given how AI's kind of helped with that.
Yes.
But you can kind of pick up on that already with AI stuff. We can kind of pick up on the resume who's used AI. It's, use AI, but still make
It's
it
easy to
human at the end of
tell.
the day.
Yeah.
But that's my take, I think. Or like if you're gonna do something like for an engineering interview, it's a little bit harder, but
Yeah.
probably like have them connect with the hiring manager right off the bat, and then do like a coffee or something, and then maybe jump into like a coding session, like a pair programming, or even like a whiteboarding session, something that will basically get their interest. Just because I look at hiring as a two-way street, right? Just as much as the
Yeah.
company would want somebody on the board, we want to make sure that the person on the other side also is interested in that front.
Agreed. I also ascribe to that belief as well. And we should make the experience good for both ends, right? We should all it should be mutually beneficial across the board.
Yeah.
But really like candidly looking at how the existing experience is, it's not great. I think everyone's upset on both sides right now. AI might be exacerbating it. Willow is a one-way video interviewing tool, just so you know. And
Yeah,
we we talk about that, like across the board, like how can we bring more even though we know these tools are existing, how do we make hiring more human? How do we make it
yeah,
happier, friendlier, and make it actually work for us, especially with how many applications are coming through, how much talent professionals have to go through to find that one fit, and still might not even retain them, right?
exactly.
So how do we use these tools thoughtfully? That's a good segue into our wild card question. Okay, now as we talk about we see a lot of AI coming in, lots of candidates are using it. How do we ensure more trust in our hiring practices? How do you think that a talent professional in 2026 can increase trust and confidence in the people that they're actually bringing in for maybe that interview stage or for the final hire?
Yeah, so when you say trust, you mean like in terms of like deep fakes and like fake profiles and things
That
like that?
could be that
That we've
too. Yeah.
so for, I can speak to that to a degree because we have run into quite a bit of that. I have jumped on calls where the person that applied and the LinkedIn is completely different than the person that is on the actual call. So for us, we have started switching into a few things. So we have some like filters and stuff built in from an AI standpoint to help with deep fakes and things like that. But
Yeah.
also I think it's about like we have switched all of our interviews to either video calls first, and we'll assess based on that. But also we're going to probably start having a few of the interviews back in the office just to verify.
Yeah.
I know a lot of companies are starting to do that again. Is having people come in back to the office just because unfortunately there's just a huge wave of stuff happening right now. A lot of fake profiles, a lot of deep fakes. So, for talent professionals, I think we definitely have to stay diligent on a lot of fronts. So, I'll give an example. Even on LinkedIn, there's candidates there. If they don't have a verified shield, that little like shield with a check mark, usually I would say, I'm not saying it's 100% either. There have been folks that have that shield that have still been the wrong person that we've interviewed. So I think just being extra diligent on that front, looking for patterns when it comes to like even the emails that they're using. If it's like an email that seems super random and off, just paying attention to those things. Are they
Yeah.
showing up to the calls? If they are further along the stage, letting them know you're going to have a background check, things like that, making sure that those are all there because, like you said, it is a ton of time invested by the teams and by the candidates. So we want to make sure that everything is good to go. But working closely with your security teams, that's obviously top of mind. We have
Mhm.
regular cadence with our security teams on that front. And not to say that everything will go perfectly, obviously, but we have to be extra diligent these days just because there is a lot of fake profiles and things happening because of AI. I also have to verify what folks have actually worked on, right? We've also
Yeah.
run into that before where people have said they've worked on stuff and then it's very clear in the interview that they did not.
Oh, man, it's wild out there right now. It's wild. When I hear this, I'm shocked. I'm sure you can see my face. I'm like, wow. I can't believe these are things I hear on Reddit, I read about, but to hear that someone's actually experienced it. So, other than Ashby and those AI checks and stuff like that, I know, and like the LinkedIn badge, is there any other like tools that you see that are doing these out there, like helping you solve this problem?
So at the moment, like I would say like we're still looking through a couple of tools, like nothing like has stood out to us. Right now,
Yeah.
most of it is like our internal security teams helping us with that having process, making sure if we feel our gut feels off about it, we're just definitely not going to move forward, right? Like use your
Yeah.
best judgment call based on that. Also verify, like you can do that yourself. You can, if look on LinkedIn. If that nothing comes up there, start on Google and kind of work your way back to see if
Yeah.
there's like, reverse engineer it. Check if the picture is real. Because the candidate that I mentioned that was fake on the call, I reverse engineered the picture and I found out that the person that he was impersonating unfortunately had passed away.
What?
Yeah. There is a lot of stuff that is going on right now.
Oh my god, this is a wild story, Ned.
Yeah, 'cause I was baffled that the person that jumped on the call, and I'm like, this is not. It was like completely off, and he wouldn't turn his screen on. That's another thing. If they will not turn their screen on, that's another huge red flag. If you hear keys in the background, that's another red flag. I've had candidates where this person that was sitting up top, and I heard their hands were moving, but it was like their hands are here, but I hear clicking. So there's obviously someone underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So there's just lot of tools,
Wow.
and companies are going to get smarter.
Yeah.
A lot of companies already have stuff in place. We're extra diligent on that front. We've had the security measures in place. We're going to continue with that as well. And I think a lot of companies are going to start clamping down on that. That's part of the reason why a lot of them are having folks come back to the office, right? You want to make sure like the person that signed the offer letter is the right person that's coming into the office.
Absolutely. Well, wow, did not expect a story like that. Thank you so much for sharing. This has been such a great conversation. I hope like everyone that's listening takes away some stuff from this because it's always interesting to see how a big company also runs like this. We have like a really diverse group of guests that come on, but thank you so much, Nit. It's been lovely chatting with you. Thank you for being
Yeah,
part of
likewise.
Looks Good on Paper.
Yeah, likewise, Anita. Appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. Oh. Thanks for joining me on Looks Good on Paper, powered by Willow. If today's 3-question sprint gave you something new to think about, hit subscribe and share with your network, because in hiring, and really in life, it's never just about what looks good on paper.